She stood at gate C12 with her boarding pass, and no ticket, my grandmother, dressed in her Sunday cardigan, hands trembling but smiling, because she thought this was the trip that would finally include her. But it wasn't a trip, it was a setup. They took her money, boarded the flight to Europe, and left her standing there like she was a glitch in their plan. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. I was supposed to go with them, but instead I stayed, and that's the day everything changed. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a story of what happens when someone finally says, enough. I still remember the way the airport lights bounced off her silver hair. My grandmother, Edith May Bennett, stood beside me at gate C12, holding onto her little suitcase and a manila envelope like they were made of glass. She had picked her best cardigan, the navy one with gold buttons, and her old black travel flats that hadn't touched airport tiles in decades. Her hands trembled, not from age but from something quieter, hope. We were supposed to go to Europe, Rome, Paris, Vienna. A family trip, they said, one last grand adventure together. My father, Robert Bennett, had gathered us over Thanksgiving and pitched it like one of his real estate deals, all smiles and scripted sincerity. He said they needed some help covering the initial booking fees, just a small contribution. And Grandma, with that familiar, generous heart, offered $19,500 from her savings. "It's worth it," she whispered to me after the dinner, "if it means they'll let me in again." Now, standing at the check-in counter, that hope cracked. The agent looked confused. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bennett isn't listed on the reservation." I turned to my father, who blinked twice, feigning surprise. "Must be a system glitch," he muttered. "Probably the website screwed up." But the boarding passes printed, one by one, for him, for Clara, my aunt, for Brooke and Tyler, the cousins, for everyone, except Edith. She held out the envelope, but I thought I paid. Dad took a sharp breath. "Mom, maybe it's for the best. Long flights, stairs in old cities, your knees, remember? We'll bring back photos. It'll be like you were there." No apology, no embrace, just dismissal. I stood frozen. My grandmother's lips quivered, but no tears fell. Her eyes looked down at the envelope, then up at the gate beyond the glass. "There's no ticket for me," she murmured. "Not to me, not to them, just out loud, like saying it might make sense." The family started moving toward the jet bridge. I didn't. "Then I'm not going either," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. She turned to me. "Lucy, no, you've been dreaming of this trip. Not without you." So, they flew to Europe, and we walked out of the airport, back into the cold Madison wind. She held her suitcase tighter this time, and I held her hand. The drive home was quiet, not the awkward kind, the kind that wraps around your ribs and squeezes. Outside, snow dusted the rooftops. Inside, the heater hummed, and neither of us spoke a word. When we reached Grandma's little house on Rose Hill Street, she moved slowly. She didn't sigh, didn't cry, just walked inside, hung up her coat, and wheeled her suitcase to the living room, the one she had packed with care and anticipation. I followed her, unsure whether to speak or let the silence say it all. She unzipped the suitcase and began unpacking with precise, quiet hands. One folded cardigan, one small bottle of lavender lotion, a worn travel guidebook from 1998, and her passport stiff and unused. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching. My chest burned with everything I hadn't said, that they had planned this, that she had been nothing more than a bank account in their eyes, that love shouldn't be earned with dollars. But all I did was make her tea. When I handed it to her, she was sitting in her recliner, holding a photograph, an old one of her and Dad on a beach somewhere. Her fingers gently traced the edges. "I really thought maybe this time was different," she said softly. I knelt beside her. It should have been. She didn't answer, just stared ahead. Later that night, when she went to bed, I opened my laptop. I didn't even know what to search for, but my fingers moved on instinct. Financial Elder Abuse Laws, Wisconsin. Dozens of links, legal codes, stories, helplines. One caught my eye. Bureau of Senior Rights Protection. Report suspected abuse here. My stomach turned. Was this really abuse? Was it just manipulation? Did it even matter? All I knew was that she gave them nearly 20 grand, and they left her standing at a gate with a suitcase full of nothing. And no one should ever have to unpack that kind of silence alone. So I copied the number, and I made a decision. The next morning, while Grandma watered her winter pansies out front, I stepped onto the porch with my phone in hand. I dialed the number I'd saved the night before. The woman who answered was calm, warm-voiced. She asked a few questions, and when I mentioned the name Bennett, she paused, then transferred me. "Joshua Linwood speaking," came the next voice, steady, measured, the kind of voice that didn't rush. I told him everything, the Thanksgiving dinner, the payment, the airport, the look on her face. I spoke until my throat hurt. Joshua didn't interrupt, not once. I'd like to come meet your grandmother, he said. Would tomorrow afternoon work? I blinked. You mean here, at her house? Yes, he said gently. This isn't just paperwork, this is personal. The next day, he showed up in a charcoal gray blazer and jeans. No briefcase. Just a folder tucked under his arm and a kind expression on his face. He greeted Grandma with a soft handshake. Mrs. Bennet, I'm here as your advocate. Lucy told me what happened, and with your permission, I'd like to help. Grandma was hesitant at first. Her fingers curled tightly around her teacup. I don't want trouble, she whispered. They're still my family. Joshua nodded, sitting lightly on the edge of the armchair across from her. And I respect that. But what they did, coercing you into handing over money under false promises, then abandoning you, may qualify as financial exploitation under state law. She didn't speak for a long moment, so I did. Baoi, I said quietly, this isn't revenge, this is protection. It's about making sure no one treats you like that again. Her eyes met mine, and something shifted. She nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Joshua smiled, not triumphant, just warm. Only your truth. We'll gather documentation, bank statements, emails, any messages, and if you're comfortable, we'll begin a formal claim. Grandma exhaled, long and slow. All right, if Lucy believes it matters, then so do I. That was the moment. Not of fury, not of vengeance, but of clarity. We weren't doing this to destroy anyone. We were doing it to rebuild something that should never have been broken in the first place. Dignity. We started at the bank. Joshua and I met with Sharon, the branch manager at Willow Savings, a petite woman with cropped gray hair and eyes that darted between us with concern. She'd known Grandma for nearly 2 decades. Edith doesn't take out large sums, Sharon said as she pulled up the account records. She budgets to the penny. When she withdrew that much, I remember wondering. She printed the statements without hesitation. There it was, in black and white, a wire transfer of $19,500 to an account held by Robert J. Bennett, marked as Family Travel Fund. That was the Monday after Thanksgiving, I whispered. Joshua nodded, tucking the sheet into his folder. Next, we visited the airport. We tracked down the gate agent, a young woman named Tamara who wore her airline badge on a lanyard lined with smiley face pins. When we explained who we were, her face darkened. I remember her, Tamara said. She looked confused. She kept asking why she wasn't checked in. Her son told me she was too frail to fly, said it was best if she just went home. Did that feel right to you? Joshua asked. Tamara hesitated, then shook her head. No, it felt off, cold. She agreed to submit a signed statement. Back home, Grandma made grilled cheese while Joshua scanned paperwork in the dining room. It was surreal, like building a legal case in the middle of a quiet Tuesday afternoon. But her hands no longer trembled. She moved with quiet purpose. Maybe it's time, she said while slicing tomatoes. They realized I'm not just a wallet in a rocking chair. Joshua chuckled. You're a force of nature, Mrs. Bennet. She blushed, then waved him off. That night, we sat together and reviewed everything, statements, records, testimony. Every piece added weight, not just to the case, but to her voice. For the first time in years, she was being heard. And that changed everything. 3 weeks later, they landed back in Wisconsin. I knew their arrival time. Joshua had pulled the flight details from the agency invoice, ironically paid with the money Grandma gave them. I didn't tell her I was going. She was pruning her rose bushes when I slipped out. Just running errands, I said casually. She nodded and handed me a shopping list. I arrived at Dane County Regional Airport an hour early. Joshua stood beside me in a slate suit, his face composed but unreadable. In his hands was a manila envelope. Inside, bank statements, Tamara's signed witness testimony, and 2 court-issued notices of legal investigation. We waited in silence until the crowd began pouring through arrivals. Then I saw them. Dad came first, dragging 2 souvenir-covered suitcases. Clara followed, wrapped in a scarf and sipping an espresso. Brooke and Tyler giggled behind her, scrolling through their phones. They looked sun-kissed, relaxed, untouched. Until they saw me. I stepped forward. Joshua moved with me. Robert Bennett? Clara Whitmore? Joshua's voice was calm, clipped. You've been served. He handed each of them a document. Dad blinked. What is this? Notice of pending civil investigation under Wisconsin Elder Protection Code, Joshua said. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Failure to respond within 7 business days will result in escalation to formal charges. Clara ripped off her sunglasses. You can't be serious. Joshua raised an eyebrow. We are. Dad turned to me, his voice rising. Lucy, you did this? No, I said evenly. You did. I'm just the one holding you accountable. Brooke looked between us, eyes wide. We didn't mean to hurt her. You left her at an airport with no ticket and no explanation. And you used her money to do it. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. For the first time, no one spoke. Joshua stepped in. This conversation is over. We'll see you at mediation. We turned and walked away. But before I left the terminal, I looked back, not out of guilt, just to see. And what I saw wasn't shock or anger, it was fear. They weren't used to consequences. They had never expected the quiet ones to rise. But we had. They didn't show up. Mediation came and went without them. No email, no explanation, not even a lawyer on their behalf. Just silence. The same silence they used when they left Grandma standing at the gate. Joshua wasn't surprised. People like them, he said, they think ignoring the law makes it disappear. It didn't. 1 week later, the judge granted a default ruling in Grandma's favor. Full restitution of $19,500, payable within 30 days. But that wasn't all. Based on the evidence of deception and emotional harm, the court also placed an immediate hold on all inheritance claims from her estate, including those of Robert Bennett, Clara Whitmore, and their immediate families. A formal recommendation for full disinheritance was filed. When I brought the papers home, Grandma was in the kitchen folding dish towels. I laid them on the table. She stared at the pages for a long time, not blinking, not breathing. Then she reached for her glasses. "They really did this to me," she said quietly. Not with shock, but with the solemn calm of someone who'd suspected the truth for far too long. I nodded. "I'm sorry it had to come to this." She looked at me and smiled. Small, soft, but sure. "No, sweetheart, I'm sorry I let it go on this long." That night, she called Mr. Hanley, her estate attorney from years ago. I listened from the hallway as she spoke clearly, without hesitation. "I'd like to update my will. Remove Robert and Clara entirely. No partials, no trusts, nothing. They've had enough chances." When she hung up, she looked at me and said, "I'm not doing this out of spite, Lucy. I'm doing it for peace. Peace means not giving people another opportunity to hurt you." And I understood. In the weeks that followed, she closed the joint savings account she'd once shared with Dad. We opened a new protected trust in her name. She named me as her financial advocate. "I want you to be able to handle things if I can't," she said. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You'll always be able to, Grandma." She smiled, but we both knew better. Something in her had shifted. Not bitterness, but clarity. We returned to routine slowly. Grocery runs, weekend walks, painting flowers on Sunday afternoons. But something new bloomed in her, something bright. She started sketching again, laughing again, even signed up for a watercolor class at the senior center. Her first painting? A gate under stormy skies. She titled it Gate C12. I didn't have to ask what it meant. She knew she couldn't rewrite the past. But for the first time, she was rewriting her ending. On her terms. And that changed everything. Spring came late that year, but when it did, it came in gold. Grandma had once told me that yellow tulips meant hope, not joy, not luck, hope. "Joy comes and goes," she said, tracing her finger across a seed packet. "But hope? Hope is what keeps you moving even when joy disappears." So I planted them, all along the white fence that wrapped around her little yard on Rose Hill Street. One by one. 60 bulbs, knees in the dirt, the cold still biting through my sleeves. She thought I was just fussing with landscaping. I didn't correct her. In April, they bloomed. A soft, sunlit border of yellow against the quiet gray of her house. That morning, she stood on the porch with her tea, wearing the same cardigan she had worn at the airport. Except now, it looked like it belonged to someone at peace, not someone waiting to be chosen. She didn't say anything, just stared at the flowers, blinking hard. I stepped beside her. "I figured you could use something to look forward to." She didn't speak for a moment, then squeezed my hand. "I already do, you." That summer, I applied to the master's program in gerontology and elder advocacy at UW-Madison. When I told her, she teared up. "I always knew you'd take care of people," she whispered. "I just never imagined you'd start with me." I smiled. "You're the reason I even know how." We got back to living, quietly but fully. She made friends at her painting class, sold 3 watercolor pieces at the fall craft fair. She even had a favorite coffee shop downtown, where the barista knew her order and called her Miss Edith. She was no longer the woman forgotten at a boarding gate. She was known. 2 years passed. Then, one October morning, I found her sitting by the window wrapped in her quilt, her gaze soft and far away. "I'm just slower these days," she murmured. I brushed her silver hair back. "The tulips will come again." She nodded. "They always do." 2 weeks later, she passed in her sleep. No pain, no struggle, just peace. We buried her under an old oak near the lake where she used to walk in her younger years. I placed a bouquet of fresh yellow tulips at her grave, wrapped in a ribbon with her initials, EMB. The turnout was bigger than I expected. People from her art class, Sharon from the bank, Tamara from the airport sent a card that said, "She mattered." And she did. She still does. I still live in her house. Every spring, I sit on the porch with my tea, watching the fence line bloom in gold. And I say it out loud, just for her. You didn't just raise a granddaughter, Grandma. You raised a fighter. You raised a witness. You raised a legacy. And that's enough. For this life and the next. No one should have to pay to be loved, and no one deserves to be forgotten just because they were too kind to speak up. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. Stand beside the one they left behind, and protect what others thought could be used and discarded. My grandmother didn't fight with anger, she healed with truth. And those yellow tulips that bloomed every spring, they weren't just flowers, they were proof she was never invisible. If this story moved something in you, leave a moment in the comments. A memory, a name, a truth you've held quietly. And if you believe in the kind of justice that restores rather than destroys, subscribe to Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, where every story ends, not with bitterness, but with rebirth.